Blessings on this season to everybody who's here. We have such a big group today. This is wonderful. And I can understand why we do, because we have a couple of stunning holiday time guests. And I'm going to be speaking in our special spiritual guest segment with Clair Linzey. She is a British theologian. And just think about that for a minute. How often do you actually meet one of those? She's also an ethicist and a writer. As Sarah said, she heads the Oxford Center for Animal Ethics. And she, among many, many other things, specializes in animal ethics, systematic theology, feminist theology, and Christian moral thought. Welcome so much, Clair Linzey.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and thank you, Reverend Sarah, for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
And thank you for being up late at night. I know it's not our regular time for your time zone. So very interested. I'm sorry. I am very interested, Claire, in what it was like growing up as Andrew Lindsay's daughter. Those of us who have been around a while, it's like Andrew Lindsay has always been here and he has always been for the animals. So tell us a little bit about that legacy piece.
Well, I can't tell you what it's like not to be his daughter. I think it's it's probably quite unusual, I guess. And I wasn't aware as a child how unusual it was. So he was chaplain to the Essex University when I was a child, and I'm one of four. And we were surrounded by students and people of all different faiths. So I think it was fairly natural, really, that I would grow up to be a theologian, though I am the only one of the four who did that. But we were raised with the idea that God loved animals, that God cares more for the rest of creation, and it's just basic tenet of how I see the world. If you'd asked me when I was a child what a Christian person was like, I would have told you they were definitely a vegetarian. Probably left wing, very compassionate, and thought more about other people and other beings themselves. So I will say there was a little disappointment when I got older and met some other people who consider themselves religious. So I think that that's reconciling the Lindsay worldview with sometimes the less compassionate acts of other people who are Christians is something I would say that I struggle with still. But I think that grounding in the basic understanding that God loves the world and God cares about more than human beings is just foundational to how I see the world. I mean, I will say that it has its challenges, but it's also a blessing. I mean, working with him is yeah, I mean, working with parents has its moments, but it's never not interesting, and it's a cause I believe deeply in, and it's wonderful to wake up and think that we might be hopefully doing some good in the world, spreading some compassion.
So where did your father come upon these beliefs about animals? Certainly, when he was starting out, it must have been quite unusual.
It was quite unusual. What I think I should say that if you want a fuller answer to this, you should eventually watch the Animal Thing, the movie, which we've just finished making. But the shorter version is that I think he grew up with people who ate meat, and he would tell you that when he was a very young child, he made the connection between, what was on the plate and the chicken, the animal, and the chicken on the plate, and he was told a lie that you had to eat meat to survive, and he thought, and I think that that's a basic moral instinct that a lot of children have, that this is that they don't want to eat animals, but actually that this is just what we have to do to survive. That this is just what happens. It's not very nice, but that's what it is. And it wasn't until he met a vegetarian, till he was 14, when he was 14, that he realized that actually he could live differently, and he became vegetarian instantly. That's also the time in which he found God and decided to become a priest. So I mean, for him, they come together. Those ideas about God and animals actually are very closely aligned. But I think it certainly was unusual, and he would tell you that it has been a very unusual path he's walked, but not unprecedented. So many other religious people, many other Christian people have thought deeply about animals. He just wasn't surrounded by them. But nonetheless felt deeply that God cared for animals, and that he could help persuade people that this was how God the Creator sees the world.
Well, tell us about the movie.
Yeah, sorry for the plug.
Oh, no, we want to hear.
What it's so Andrew had this idea that he would like to make a movie about his work, and my brother is a filmmaker, and so we undertook to make a movie about his life, his struggles for animals. It's he would say, an embarrassingly personal movie, and yeah, it's currently going to film festivals, and hopefully will premiere at one over the winter. And it's yeah, for those of you, I know there's some people in the audience who were at the summer school. It had its first private screening at our summer school this summer, and yeah, it was a privilege to share it with people. Yeah, he would say it's too personal, but I think it's an important journey to chart. And it just strikes, like a lot of animal people, we have struggles, things we fought for, and it's nice to be able to share those struggles, because I think the best thing about the movie, from my perspective, is that I think it's hopeful. It's real in its struggles, but I think it's also hopeful, and it shows what it takes to spend your life, as I'm sure many of the people listening to this already know, what it takes to give your life for animals, to give your life for any cause, really.
Yes. So tell us a little bit, Claire. You've used the word Christian a few times, and that word, when I hear it, at least here in the States, just sounds different from the way it sounded when I was growing up as a Christian. So I'm just interested in what that means to you today in your work for animals and just how you see the world.
Well, it's a hard question. In many ways, it's actually not something. I am a Christian. I am Church of England. It's not something or Episcopalian, I think is your equivalent. It's not something I actually advertise a lot, to be honest. Though I am a member of Wycliffe Hall, which is a Christian theological community in Oxford, and I think it's, for me professionally, and in terms of the work I'm doing, it's really, really important, the Christian focus, because so many ideas that people have about animals, that they're here for our use, that we can do what we want with them, dominion, domination, are actually misconstrued Christian ideas that people have just taken up into their beliefs and thinks it's just part of their lives. So for me, it's very important to talk to a Christian community, because I'm hoping to change that perspective. And you've got to be in it to make a difference, I think. But it also applies beyond the Christian community, because Christianity's, it's influenced so much of the way we live our lives. Most people don't know that their ideas are Christian, or have a Christian basis. But for me, spiritually, I do adopt a slightly more personal interfaith approach. I like meditation and yoga, and I think I would be classed more like a nature mystic, perhaps. I think I believe God is in creation, and I think the most the greatest sense one has of God really is within God's creation. And I think for me, the very heart of it all, which is why it matters to be a theist, is the idea that humans are not God. It's a very simple idea. And yet, so many people act as if the world is theirs to do what they want. They assume godlike power. And actually, I think the Jesus message is one of moral inclusivity. Sorry, my dog is making noise. He likes. But it is what you see in Jesus is the higher sacrificing themselves for the lower. And it's a deeply profound message, especially in the time of climate change, because I think if we are to get through the crises that the world is throwing at us at the moment, in all kinds, what we need is a commitment to peace. We need a commitment to compassion, but also we have to have a sense that it might cost something. It might actually cost more than we want to give up. And for some people, giving up eating animals is a big thing, and yet it is essential if we are to face the challenges ahead of us. Sorry, that was a bit rambly, wasn't it?
No, that was, and I'm so glad that you brought in the climate change. One of the things we try to do here is make connections. Certainly, there are people helping animals in different ways, and I'm working with a couple of people now on a panel, and a medical doctor, a dietitian, and myself, and we're so excited because we're trying to get the ethical vegans and the health vegans to be in the same room together nicely. And I know this happens with environmentalists, with how can we communicate with the animals at the center and do a better job of keeping ourselves out of it?
Oh, I don't know. I think, I think that it's an inherently, we see our worlds inherently from our own perspective. And I think that is the fundamental challenge of being human, to try and see beyond ourselves, to see beyond our own concerns, our own worries, the animal community. I'm sorry, I don't know what my dog's doing. But I feel, for me, I think it all goes together. And that's why I always talk about peace, because I think it is about living non-violently, and living non-violently is good for animals and it's good for humans. We're trapped in cycles of violence that we need to escape. And whether you think that's for health reasons, because it's violence to your own body, or whether you think it's for public health reasons, because we're running out of antibiotics, or whether you just think that causing animals harms causes more harms to human beings, all of which are true. They're all systematically linked. You see how you said before, I'm a systematic theologian. It all goes together. And I think we have to use all the tools at our disposal to reach people where they are, which is enormously difficult to do.
Yeah. Well, tell us what a systematic theologian is, and then if you could tie that in to the whole idea of there being an academic discipline around animal ethics. That's certainly not at every university. That's not a universal course of study. So what's it like? Systematic, and then tell us about animal ethics in an academic setting.
Okay. Well, a systematic theologian is a theologian who holds that all the doctrines, all different ideas about God go together. So you can't have an idea of God the creator without salvation. They hold it all together. And for me, that's key to the moral theology, because tell me what kind of God you believe in, and I'll tell you your ethics. The one flows from the other. So it is about understanding the whole when it comes to people's beliefs. And I think that's, generally speaking, a holistic approach to life is always a positive thing. In terms of animal ethics, so Dad began as a theologian too. So I'm a second generation animal theologian, which is in itself quite funny. But he saw beyond his own discipline and saw that there was something really important about all the disciplines talking to each other. So when I think of animal ethics, it isn't just about philosophy. It's not just about law. It's, it really takes an approach which tries to get animals on the academic agenda throughout, because we need it on the academic agenda throughout, because it affects all of our different disciplines. Doesn't matter if you're a scientist, doesn't matter if you're, a historian. I know Robin Heedeman's in the audience. She does great work on animals and history, and I think at all points in our lives, we don't do enough talking to each other. And so the goal of my work really is to try and help build community, try and help animal academics, because they're often very marginalized, and try and support their work, and just basically get more animals out there to be considered morally, because it really does impact every aspect of our lives.
So what can you tell us, Claire, about what's going on for animals in the UK? I've always felt that you guys were several steps ahead, and it's really fun to see what's happening there now.
I don't know if we are several steps ahead. I like to think that we're making some progress, but the reality is that every country in the world is making some steps forward and some steps back. And that's, for example, we've just released a report on predator control, which I hope will eventually have impact beyond the UK, but the Scottish Government is currently considering the practices that they allow to govern moorland. Most of those practices are done so that they can shoot grouse. So they kill other animals so they can shoot the grouse. And it's horrible. Trapping, snaring, poisoning happens throughout the globe. So we're really trying to get that on the agenda so they'll consider it. But I think you hit those same barriers that you do in the rest of the world. So, for example, conservationists seem to have the continual argument that we need to kill other animals so that other animals can flourish, which is appalling. It's not all conservationists; some are compassionate, but it has been the dominant trend. So that's the thing we're really focusing on the moment, because I just think it's unnecessary and it's part of some outdated wisdom that needs to be challenged. But grouse shooting is a practice of the elite, and it comes with its own institutional resistance. But in other ways, we're making some steps forward. But I think our current Conservative government is not as progressive as you would like. Banning trophy hunting is going through the House of Lords at the moment, and they passed through the House of Commons, but they're basically rejecting it from the Lords level and making all kinds of amendments, even though there's wide public support for it. So yeah, that wasn't as uplifting as I'd like that to be. Let me think if there's something good I can share.
Well, I hear there's a summer school over there that is just worth saving up for.
Well, that is something that is wonderful that happens every year. Yeah, we're going into our 9th year, and Reverend Sarah's for the last 2 years, I think, maybe 3. And yeah, it's it is a really wonderful and uplifting occasion. And a lot of people tell me they come mostly for rejuvenation and to restore them for the work ahead, which is an amazing gift. But basically it's 150 academics, advocates around the world, who come, and they talk on a different theme each year. This year's theme is Animal Thinkers, and we are celebrating the pioneers of ethical sensitivity to animals. And I'm sure there'll be some ones we know, but the idea is that there are also many that we don't know. I want to hear the unheralded stories. We have a movement which seems to be filled with men at the top, big names, Peter Singer, Tom Reagan. And I would just love to hear about the women, and what they've done for animals, and also just the people who are working on the ground, pioneering their thought in different disciplines. So yeah, it is my favorite part of the year. It's intense, but it's definitely worth coming for.
In my 50 years of this, there were always lots and lots of women, and there were a couple of guys at the top who always got quoted. So in our very last minute, and I mean literally minute, it always goes so fast. It's almost Christmas. If Jesus were to come in 2023 and give a Christmas message, what would be at the heart of it?
I think what would be at the heart of it would be compassion and love and concern for the weakest among us. It is what my dad calls a paradigm of inclusive moral generosity. And I think that's really what we need now. It's that great joke, if Jesus came back now, he'd be found in a gay bar. And I think there's some truth to that. It is at the margins, and it's hard to argue that animals aren't the most marginal.
Claire, thank you so very much. It's been absolutely delightful.